Beginning our Daf Mesech this Yoma Daf Pei Beis, we begin at the top of the Yomah. We will continue with the theme of the previous Mishnah, is discussing the Inuyim of Yom Kippur, specifically that regarding not eating and drinking on Yom Kippur. Which corresponds because the Cheskel, Taran Zebrat Chaim, Mazel Tov Bal Simcha, Shbeis Chesed Ben Yehudis. The Raised campaign is still going strong, a little bit more for the Grand River Stiebel. Some of these we're going to discuss in today's Daf are fasting on Yom Kippur for small children. That's the theme of the first Mishnah. Then we continue with the next Mishnah that discusses if a pregnant woman smells food, and halacha is more lenient to allow her to eat because of danger to her and to her fetus. Then we discuss the famous halacha of the three cardinal sins for which a person must be willing to relinquish their life, known as avodah zarah, idolatry, gilui arais, immorality, and shlichus dam, murder, which is the exception to the rule that the halacha is yahareg val yaver. Generally, the halacha is that a person's life takes precedence. It goes in halacha more important than any mitzvah. But these three cardinal sins, halacha is yahareg val yaver. They have to be willing to be killed and not violate the halacha. So we begin the current daf on the top of the yomim. We begin the next mishnah. Tinaikis, the young children. We don't afflict them on Yom Kippur, meaning we're not obligated to hold back food from them. But we do train them for a certain amount of hours. Lifnei shana. Now the word lifnei shana is misleading. The way Rashi translated is that it's before the year that's close to the year that they actually become an adult. Meaning, a girl becomes an adult when she's 12 years old. Now the wording of Rashi is also misleading because Rashi says ben shleish esrei l'nekeva. When Rashi used the word shleish esrei, Rashi means to say she's into her 13th year. We call that a 12-year-old. And 14 for a zachar is really what we call, that's what I'm saying, the concepts here are not so difficult, but the wording on these next few lines, they're just a little bit hard to translate. So, and it's 14th year of a male, which is really 13 years old. Because normal is that a girl, she brings 2 pubic hairs, which is when she becomes adult, when she turns 12, which is in the 13th year, and that's the period when she could get punished for averos. And a boy is in the 14th year, which is 13 years old and 1 day, which is again what we call bar mitzvah. So the girl, a year before her the boy, if we're talking about and then we'll see in the Gemara, so who we're actually talking about, but the 13th year, meaning for a boy, let's say, when he's in his 14th year, what we call bar mitzvah. So the 13th year, meaning when he's 12 years old, is the year before his parent, the year before he becomes an adult. The 12th year, which is when he's an 11-year-old, is the year before the year. So when we're saying only the words lifnei shana, it's a little bit hard to read the words. The words lifnei shana really means to say when he's an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old when he's bar mitzvah. The year before is what Rashi using the words as shana samach lepirka, is the year before. When we use the word lifnei shana, we mean before the year that's before the 11-year-old. That's what the words lifnei shana means. So it's hard to translate, but that's what we mean when we say lifnei shana. So we start training him for hours, like we say over here. Lifnei shana is before the year prior to bar mitzvah. So that's 2 years before. And lifnei shnatayim, and it's also before 2 years before. So it's before the 2 years before his bar mitzvah, which is 3 years before his bar mitzvah, which is when he's a 10-year-old. Which the Gemara is going to ask and say, wait a second, if you're telling me that you're already training him shnatayim 2 years before the year before, which is 3 years before his bar mitzvah, you say mechanchem. So why do you have to say lifnei shana? Which again, the way we're translating means 2 years before the mitzvah. Obviously, if you're training him 3 years before the mitzvah, you're training him 2 years before the mitzvah. So why would you even say that? But that's what the Gemara is that's going to be the first question the Gemara is going to address. But just to read again what the Mishnah is saying, although there's no obligation of inui for children, but we do train them lifnei shana, which again means not the year before, but it means the year before, which is 2 years before, and lifnei shnatayim is before the 2 years before, which is 3 years before. That's why we train them b'shloshim v'gilim mitzvah, so that there should be a custom to mitzvahs, which is one of the primary reasons of chinuch, is to inaugurate them that once they become bar mitzvah, which Mit Hashem we're making in a week, That, why are they doing mitzvah until then? Not mechuyev, but they get used to it. They're up and running as it happens. Okay, now the Gemara asks, it says, I don't understand. You're telling me that 3 years, again, before 2 years, prior to the mitzvah, which is an inverted way of saying 3 years before, is you're going to train the child for the mitzvah of Inui, of not eating in Kippur, for a certain amount of hours. So I'd have to tell you before the year prior to the mitzvah, which is 2 years before, that you're going to do. Of course, you already start at 10. I have to tell you at 11. So Rav Chizdi says, like Kash, not difficult. It's actually talking about two different cases. Time, two different cases. This that we said that you start 2 years before is b'chayla, is by the child that's weak and he doesn't have so much strength. So by him you start lifnei shana, which again, just to repeat myself, doesn't mean at age 12, it means age 11. And this that we said 3 years before, which is how we call him lifnei shnatayim, which is it's prior to the 2 years before, is bebar, is by a healthy child. So again, you're right. One starting at 10, one starting at 11. Okay. Now, Rav Huna, he explains in general, and we're going to come back to his opinion to see how it explains with the Mishnah. He says, Ben Chas, an 8-year-old, and again, this is just, these words, the next lines are just hard to translate, but it's not difficult concepts. An 8-year-old healthy girl that already passed 8 years and went into her 9th year, which is what we call an 8-year-old. So here Ben Chas actually means an 8-year-old. Now, as he's going to conclude his statement by saying he's talking about a girl, where her 9th year, which is when she's 8, is 4 years before she becomes an adult. And she becomes an adult at Bas Mitzvah at 12. If she's 8 now, it's 4 years before she becomes an adult. So an 8-year-old girl, uben tes, and a 9-year-old girl, if she's not so strong, she's a weaker girl, which she already passed her 9th year and she's starting her 10th year, which is what we call a 9-year-old, which is 3 years before her Bas Mitzvah. We inaugurate her to start keeping the mitzvah of fasting for a certain amount of hours, again, depending how strong she is, for either 3 or 4 years before Bas Mitzvah. Fine. Ben Yud, then when she is a healthy girl, if she already passed her 10th year and she entered into her 11th year, which is what we call a 10-year-old, Uven Yud Aleph, or she's a weaker girl, and she's entered into her 12th year, which again we call an 11-year-old. So then already we're adding to the quota. Then mashlim midrabanan. Then we don't only rabbinically require her to fast for a certain amount of hours, then also rabbinically we already require her to finish and complete the fast. That's again depending how strong she is, either 10 or 11. Now Ben Yud Beis, when she's already 12, which is when she becomes an adult, she becomes Bas Mitzvah, then mashlim midrabanan. Then we obligate her to keep the biblical fast. And again, all we're talking about here was B'tinaikis, was by a girl, which obviously when she's entered into her 13th year, what we call 12 years old, whether she's healthy or she's ill, unless it's a chilul shesh b'sakana, we say it's the same thing, and then she has to keep that fast. So what Rav Huna was saying was this halacha of a girl that he said that by a healthy girl, you start at 8 years old for a certain amount of hours, and by 10 years old, she has to start completing the fast rabbinically, and at 12, she has to complete it biblically. By a sick girl, so it was a year delayed. At 9 years old, she starts fasting a certain amount of hours. At 11, she completes the fast rabbinically, and at 12, again, both of them have to do the times midaraisa. That's what Rav Huna said. Now, Rav Nachman's not disagreeing with Rav Huna. It's just that Rav Huna is speaking about a girl. Rav Nachman's going to be speaking about a boy. So it's just an age 1 year off, because of a bar mitzvah is 13 and the bas mitzvah is 12, but they're both saying the same thing. Rav Nachman says, Ben Tes, Ben Yud, when you have a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, again, that's really the same thing that we're describing over here as a boy, which Rav Nachman and Rav Huna agree. Again, just Rav Nachman was talking about a boy. So if he's healthy, then he starts fasting for a certain amount of hours at 9 years old. If he's not so strong, Ben Yud, when he's 10 years old. Then the Chanchanais and L'Shais, then we start inaugurating him for a certain amount of hours to fast. Ben Yud Aleph, Ben Yud Beis, when he's 11, if he's stronger. Ben Yud Beis, if he's 12, if he's not so strong. Mashlim D'Rabbanan, then he has to finish the fast rabbinically. Ben Yud Gimel, when he's 30, when he's Bar Mitzvah, Mashlim D'Raisa, but then you have to complete the fast biblically as a boy. Again, like we have over here on the graph, it's the same thing, it's just 1 year delay. By a girl it starts at 8 to 12, and by a boy from 9 to 13, the same 4 years. A healthy child starts at 9 for a certain amount of hours. 2 years later at 11, he's Mashlim D'Rabbanan. 2 years later, Mashlim D'Raisa. By a sick boy, not so strong, he starts at 10, and then at 12 he's Mashlim D'Rabbanan, and at 13 he's Mashlim D'Raisa. No, that's what I'm saying. Rabbi Huna was talking about a girl. Rabbi Nachman is talking about a boy, and they're saying the same thing. Now,
how do we explain Mashlim D'Rabbanan? How do we explain that?
What does it mean, Mashlim?
Yeah,
you have to. It's a rabbinic law to finish. Yeah,
you must.
Yeah, that's the rabbinic requirement, and then but biblically is only at Bar Mitzvah.
So is there a kula that comes along with that?
Yeah, older abundance. If it's a suffix or if it's whatever it is, but rabbinically there would be an obligation to finish that fast. Now, Rabbi Yechanan says, okay, he disagrees. He says that no, Hashlama D'Rabbanan Leka. He says there is no halacha of rabbinically finishing the fast. Rather, he says Ben Yud Aleph. If when we're talking about a girl over here, when she's either 10 or 11, depending on again how strong she is, then we have her fast for a certain amount of hours. And Ben Yud Beis Mashlim D'Raisa. So essentially, he's agreeing to Rav Huna Rav Nachman on the latter half of the halacha. Regarding the ages, he agrees that it's either 10 or 11. It's just that he disagrees to the two stages. He says there's never a stage of Mashlim D'Rabbanan. There's only Mechanech L'Shayis. So that starts, again, for a girl, if she's healthy at 10, if she's not so strong at 11. And then Ben Yud Beis Mashlim D'Raisa, when she's 12, she has to biblically finish the fast. That's only when you have to start. Now, the question is, the Gemara asked from our Mishnah. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Hatinaikis, the young children, we don't afflict them on Yom Kippurim. I mean, they don't have an obligation to fast. But we do inaugurate them for a certain amount of hours. Lifnei Shana, which again, it's the wording here is just what's very obtuse. It's very hard just to translate it and how the Gemara is translating the words. But we had explained already in the Mishnah that Lifnei Shana means to say before the year before, which means 2 years before Bas Mitzvah. Lifnei Shtayim, and before 2 years before, which means 3 years before. Okay, so you have to hold up a little bit how the Gemara is asking the question. Bishlim Rav Huna Rav Nachman. We understand according to Rav Huna Rav Nachman that they say that there is a halacha of Hashlama Midrabanan, not like Rabbi Yechanan. They hold there's two stages. There's first Mechanech L'Shayis. You first start getting them used to this, get the feet wet, fast a few hours. And then there's, rabbinically you have to finish it. And then there's the biblical when you become Bas Mitzvah. So now, Rashi, as he's explaining the Gemara's point over here, has to address a question. Although according to Rav Huna Rav Nachman, the chinuch of a healthy girl or boy started 4 years before. So where in the Mishnah you see anything about 4 years before? Mishnah doesn't say anything about 4. Mishnah says at the most, the Mishnah says that 3 years before. It says Lefnei Shana, Lefnei Shnatayim. It said where we said that what does it mean a year before? We said it means before the year prior to the Bar Mitzvah, 2 years. Before 2 years prior to the Bar Mitzvah, which is 3 years. But they're saying a halacha of 4 years. That's how they're saying that Bebari, you have to fast 4 years before. Okay, so Rashi explains that what we're going to explain for them is that actually our Mishnah is talking about a chayla, talking about someone who's not so strong. And then we could explain the Mishnah by saying that when the Mishnah says that we train them for a certain amount of hours, lifnei shana v'lifnei shtayim, prior to the year before and prior to 2 years before, you know how we're going to translate this to mean? We're going to translate this to mean as follows. Lifnei shana l'divreihem. 2 years before rabbinic time of Hashlama. V'lefnei shtayim, and the Gersa is supposed to be over here l'divrei Torah. Meaning, like Karfuna had said, he said that in the 10th year, when the girl is 9 years old, so then we said that you're going to train the girl who's not so well for a certain amount of hours. Right? We said by this graph over here, the girl who's, again, we're talking about the mission is talking about a chayla. She's not so strong. So we said that when she's in her 10th year, which is that she's 9 years old, she has to start fasting for a certain amount of hours, which is lefnei shana. It's near the year before, 2 years before, meaning if you're saying lefnei shana means to say prior to the year before, right? We were saying all along lefnei shana doesn't mean the year before, it means prior to the year before, which is 2 years before. You know, it's again, it's just a very interesting way how the Gemara is translated, so you just have to hulk up a little bit. It's actually one case. Lefnei shana, lefnei shlatayim is describing two variables, but it's one case. It's saying it's 2 years before the halacha of when you rabbinically have to be mashlim, which is when she's in her 12th year, what we call 11 years old, which is lifnei shtatayim of when biblically you have to be mashlim. So essentially how they're explaining is, the Mishnah is b'chayla, that's lifnei shana of when you rabbinically have to be mashlim, which is lifnei shtatayim of when you biblically have to be mashlim. So it's very different how we're translating up until now. Up until now, we were trying to say the way Rav Chizda was saying that, oh, it's two different cases. Lefnei shana is for a healthy girl. Lefnei shtatayim is for lefnei shana is for a for a chayla, and lefnei shtatayim is for a healthy girl. Therefore, it's a year difference. For Rav Huna Nachman, we have to translate the Mishnah totally different. It's one case of a chayla that we're describing what year when she turns 9 is when we start training her for hours, which is 2 years before she has to be mashlim d'Rabbanan, which is 3 years before she's mashlim d'Oraisa. That's how we're translating it according to them. How it fits in with their halacha that they said that you start at age 8. The Mishnah doesn't say anything about 4 years before, only says either 2 or 3. No, it's one case of the chayla girl who's starting at 9, which is 2 years before what we call lefnei shana, and lefnei shnatim, which is before you mashlim d'Oraisa. That's how we have to translate according to Rav Nachman. Okay, the question is, Rabbi Yechon Kasha, according to Rabbi Yechon, is difficult. According to him, there's no, at least according to Rabbi Nachman, we can find a way to translate the Mishnah that's going to fit in with their opinion. But according to Rabbi Yechon, there's no way at all. Because he had said, we quoted him before, that he doesn't hold at all of any rabbinic hashlama. So you can't say that the Mishnah is one case like we just explained to Rabbi Nachman. Now, Rashi says, well, how about saying that the Mishnah is like the way Rav Chizda had explained in the beginning of the Amid? Maybe the Reisha, meaning of Lefnei Shana, is by a Chayla, and the Seif of Lefnei Shana Tayim is by a Bari, like Rav Chizda said. So says Rashi, you can't. Because the Mishnah says that it's 3 years before what we call Lefnei Shana Tayim, which is 3 years before for a healthy person, and Lefnei Shana, which is 2 years before for Chayla. Rabbi Yochanan said, and all you have is 2 years before for a healthy person and 1 year before for a not so strong person. So you don't have a way of explaining the Mishnah of 3 years before. There's no 3 years before according to Rabbi Yochanan because there's no 2 stages. Rav Huna and Nachman, they had these 2 stages, which is like first you do l'shois and then you have mashlimin. So you have way more earlier years. According to Rabbi Yochanan, really you're just starting at 10 and 11. 10 is for the stronger girl and 11 is for the not so strong girl. So that's either at most 2 or 1 year before, but our Mishnah is saying Lefnei Shana of Lefnei Shnatayim, which is either 2 or 3 years before. How are you going to translate that? It can't be one case, like we said for Rav Nachman, and it can't be like Rav Chizda said, 2 different cases because that's way too early. So now Rabbi Yochanan will tell you that actually you're translating the Mishnah incorrectly.
It can't be 2 years before Mechanku Shabbos and 3 years before Mashlim and Verais.
Well, you can't have, right, you can't have 3 years before. Because he doesn't have it 3 years before. First of all, he doesn't have the halacha mashlimin, midrabban.
No, midrabban. It would be 3 years prior to Mashlim.
But he doesn't have 3 years before. He says only there's either at age 10 or 11, depending how strong the girl is, that you start mashlimin. So
this is all coming up because it says the word lifnei before.
Oh, so that's what I'm saying. The Gemara right now is going to change how we translate the word lifnei, which is interesting that was the presumptive interpretation. But Amar Rabbi Yechon says no. My shana oishtayim. He says, what does it mean a year or two? So actually he says, don't read lifnei shana that it means prior to the year before, which would mean 2 years before. And lifnei shtayim would mean prior to 2 years before, which would mean 3 years before, which according to Rabbi Yechon, there is no such thing as 3 years before. It's either 1 or 2 years before. He says, no, rather say that we train them. Samach lapirkan means to say the year before she becomes an adult when she's not well, or 2 years before when she is strong. So it's either 10 or 11, not 9 and 10. So according to Rabbi Yechon, we're reading it as without the word lifnei, which is, it's where we train them shana or shnatayim. Imagine the word lifnei is not there. A year or 2 years we train them, which is either at 11 if she's not so strong, or at 10 if she is strong. So because lifnei, because why do you say the word lifnei is superfluous? Just say we train them shana or shtayim, a year or two. You're saying lifnei shana? What do you mean before a year? That we're already talking about a year before. That's what chinuch is. It's before. That would tell you at 11. Saying lifnei was, that's why all along we were saying the presumptive interpretation was it's actually 2 years before. That's lifnei shana. And lifnei shtayim is before 2 years, which is 3 years. Yechon says, no, we'll take out the word lifnei as if it's just saying we train them for a year or 2 years, again, depending if she's strong or not so strong.
Could mean preceding, though. Could mean preceding. Just saying that
again, the word that
we're talking about chinuch, it should be
exactly would be that would be
anyway.
it's not lifnei shana. You machanech for the year, not lifnei shana. And lechanami, you would also think the translate means before the year of bar mitzvah, but then what's lifnei shnatayim? What's before the 2 years? It's shnatayim. It's 2 years. Lifnei would sound like it's beforehand. But that's what you're going to say. No, what does it mean? A year or two? It means before, near their bas mitzvah, and it's like probably what you think it means. Then lefnei shana, yeah, before that year, which is close to their when they become an adult. Then the Gemara says Tashav al Tzminga Raya, actually not like Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Like the questions now on the other opinions. The Tani Rabbi Bar Shmuel, they taught a brisa Tinaikis, the young children like we said in the Mishnah, we don't afflict them to refrain them from having food in Yom Kippurim. But we do train them shana ishtayim samach lepirkan, a year or two close to when they become adults. Now it doesn't say like the wording in our Mishnah lefnei shana v'lefnei shtayim. Oh, so now it's the other way around the questioning. Bishlam Rabbi Yechon, we understand Rabbi Yechon makes sense because he says yes. If we train them for 1 year if they're not so strong, and 2 years if they are strong. And that's exactly at age 10 and 11, the way Rabbi Yechon had said for a girl. According to them, it's difficult because the chinuch sounds like it's like for shais. Now, the problem is the least amount of chinuch for hours, according to Rav Nachman, was 3 years. Because Rav Huna said by a girl that wasn't so strong, we train her in the 10th year, meaning when she turns 9 years old. The problem is the Brisa was saying the most you have by chinuch is actually 2 years at a 10-year-old, because it was saying either a year or two. So that for sure contradicts Rav Huna of Nachman, because according to the Brisa, the most you're starting off is at 10, maybe 11, and according to them, the least is 9, maybe even 8. So how does it fit? So Rabbanan, the rabbis, Rav Huna of Nachman, they would tell you, my chinuch now tell me, no, what did the Brisa mean when it says that we train the children? It means hashlama. It means the halacha of rabbinically completing the fast. Oh, so Rav Huna of Nachman says, according to us also, the rabbinic hashlama is yes, is 2 years before she has to biblically finish it, which is at age 10. And if she's not so strong at age 11, which is exactly what the Brisa says, a year or two before she becomes bas mitzvah. Can we really call chinuch when you're finishing, you're doing like a regular bar or bas mitzvah person? But by the time in the Brisa it says, chinuch, what's considered training the child? The child would usually eat 2 hours into the day. We feed them 3 hours into the day. If they eat at 9 o'clock, we feed them 4 hours in the day, which is at 10 o'clock. So you see that chinuch is regarding hours, not regarding finishing. Some Rabbi says no. There's two types of chinuch. Yeah, there's a chinuch for hours, depending on the age of the child, and then there could even be chinuch of finishing the fast when you're very close to your bar bas mitzvah, and therefore it's not a contradiction on Runa Nachman. It could be that this brisa was talking about the chinuch of hashlama, which is yes a year or two before bar or bas mitzvah. That concludes that Mishnah. Again, it wasn't such a complicated Mishnah, but the wording was so just to get the words, what exactly the words are being said over here. Okay, the next Mishnah, continuing on the heterim, like in the previous Mishnah regarding young children, about who could eat on Yom Kippur. Says the Mishnah, Ubra sheherecha. If you have a pregnant woman that the fetus smells the food that's being cooked outside, and the child desires the food, which that's why pregnant women will tell you that the fetus has its own bearings. You have to not get angry with it when the pregnant woman, the child is there. The child's a living creature, and it's something that's happening at the time where we'll see in this halacha of this daf that the child smells, and if the child doesn't eat, both the mother and the child are going to be in danger. So halacha is machil eisach tashav nafshe. We give the woman to eat until that she calms down, because there could be danger if the child, the fetus, doesn't get the food that it's desiring. Now, similarly, chayla, a sick person, we feed the sick person based on professionals. If two doctors say that he's going to be in danger if he doesn't eat, so then we feed the sick person. Now, the nature became if there's no professionals, we feed the sick person based on what he himself is saying. Until he says enough, we go with what he's saying. That he says he has to eat, we give him. Now, in the brisa, elaborating on this halacha of feeding the pregnant woman food on Yom Kippurim. So, if a pregnant woman smells carbon meat, kachim, which is forbidden for a non-kohen to eat, or even swine, so what happens is we stick the spindle into the sauce, into the juice of that meat. We put it on her mouth, and she sucks out the juice, meaning treif or hektish, which is forbidden. If she calms down by this, that she was appeased with that juice, then it's okay. We actually don't only suck it out, we actually give her to drink that juice. Now, okay, if she calms down, good. We give her the fat of that meat to eat. And the reason is why we're going to give her chazer fat is because there's nothing that stands in the way of the danger to a person's life. We hold that that's primary importance of over all the mitzvahs in Torah, including eating chazer or hektish. Chutz, there's three exceptions of what's known as the three cardinal sins: from idolatry, vigilarais, immorality, shlichus dam, and murder. Those are the three that we say the halacha is different. We say yaharg val yava. Those generally say a person should violate the aveira b'chai behem to survive, because Hashem wants to. That's how important is a Jewish life. That you see even God with all His commandments, and you say, "Why am I so important? I have no significance." Hashem says, "No, I want you to violate every one of my mitzvahs to keep you alive. You shmendidik, you don't even want to get up in the morning. You get up at 3:00 in the afternoon. You might not even be watching this now, but I'm saying the point is, you think you have no significance, and the Torah is telling you got it wrong. You have to figure out why it is that way, but the Torah wants you to violate all the mitzvahs, Hashem's commandments, when He has how He sees the world should be, to keep you alive, except the three averas. And those are the three cardinal sins. And the Gemara says, how do we know this? How do we know each one of these averas, that these are the exceptions to the rule that we say, that a person has to be yark v'yava. Those you have to be willing to kill yourself and not violate. So Avodah Zarah is the time of Linda Brisa. We just said this before in Shachar. Rabbi says, if it says that you shall love Hashem, your God, it says with all your heart, and it says v'chol nafshecha, with all your soul. So why does it say with all your resources? And then, okay, the other way around. If it says with all your resources, why does it say with all your soul? Like Rashi explained, just say the more precious one of them, and I will know the one that's not so precious, that you have to give it up for Hashem, your God. So that says, Rabbi says, because it depends on the person. If there's a person where his body is more important to him than his money, it says, okay, your more precious thing is your life. Serve God even with all your life. Now, but you have a person that his money is more dear to him than his body, which people will give up their life for their money. Therefore it says all your resources. But the thing is, you have to give up the more precious thing for Hashem, your God. So what do you see from here? What's this pasuk talking about? V'haftas Hashem l'kecha and yichud shmo yizbarach, which is to unify God's name. You have to be willing to give up nafshecha. So obviously idolatry is out because that is against loving Hashem your God. It's the most unfaithfulness, which is what avodah zarah is. It's being zayna against your relationship with Hashem. So that's how we know that has to be b'chol nafshecha. You have to give up your life for that. Okay, moving on to the next one. So gila rayis shlichus domino. How do we know that immorality and murder, that you have to also be willing to give up your life and not commit those two cardinal sins? The time like Linda Brisa. It says, Rabbi Omer, the pasuk says in Devarim, when it talks about the Nairo Hamarasa, which is if someone is raping a betrothed girl. So the pasuk says over there that to the girl you're not going to do anything because she didn't do anything wrong. And the pasuk concludes, Ki kasher yakom ishal riyehu uritzach nefesh, because just like when the person gets up on his friend and he commits an act of murder, that's the same thing that's happening when this man is raping this woman. Now, the question is, says the Gemara, says Rebbe, what exactly are you learning out from murder to the case of rape? You're telling me that just like the judgment is by murder, Cain, that's how you're going to judge over here. What exactly is it teaching us? What is it comparing to tell us it's going to have the same halacha? So actually, Ella rather says Rebbe, actually Hariza Balalam. This is what's called, it sounds like as if murder is coming to teach us something regarding Oinus, but really it's actually learning from Oinus. What does that mean? When it sounds like it's saying, oh, just like by murder, so it's over here. But yeah, not because murder is teaching us something regarding rape. Rape is teaching us something regarding murder. To teach us manar marasa, just like the betrothed girl. Nita lehatzila, we're allowed to save her benafshay, with his life. In other words, if someone is looking on, and he could save this girl from being violated by killing the rapist, which if he didn't violate her, he's allowed to kill her. How do we know this? Because the pasuk says, in Meshila, there was no one to help her. Which the inference is, if there's someone that could save her, he has to do whatever it takes to save her. So he could shoot the guy who's trying to commit this act of Einus. Oh, so the pasuk is teaching Afreit Seyach v'chulu. Then also regarding murder, that the same thing is that Nitin Latziloi Benafshay. If you see someone trying to murder someone else, you're allowed to kill the murderer to save the victim. So actually, Reitzech is not teaching you regarding Einus. Einus is teaching you regarding Reitzech. Now, but the same thing is you do learn the reverse also. Meaning you can learn from Ritzech to Narmarasa, and that's actually the one we want to learn out for our Gemara. Ma Ritzech, just like regarding murder. The halacha is Yaharig Val Yav, you have to let yourself get killed and not violate. Meaning, if they tell you, look, buddy, you kill this guy. If you don't kill him, we're going to kill you. The halacha is Yaharig Val Yavar. You have to let yourself be killed and not murder that other person, as the Gemara is going to shortly explain how we know that. But just like we know by murder, you cannot kill someone else to save your own skin. So, Namarasa, the pasuk is comparing the two halachas. Two. But the Namarasa, let's say they say, look, you see this friend of yours, he's engaged to that girl, to that woman. You rape her, or we're going to kill you. The halacha is Yaharig Val Yavar. You have to get killed and not violated. That's what the pasuk is teaching us when it's comparing the murder to the Einus, to say that Yaharig Val Yavar. And that's the source for Gila Rayas, how we know this halacha of Yaharig Val Yavar. Now Rashi, which is the cause for the big taisvis that goes through huge Amud Beis, which makes this a very small Amud Beis for us, is Rashi points out that he says Yaharig Val Yavar is in the masculine, which is only on the man. But the woman, she actually does not have the halacha of Yaharig Val Yavar. She does not have to let herself get killed and not have an act of immorality committed with her. Why? Rashi says because she's not doing anything. She's what's called karka oilam. Karka oilam means to say I'm like a piece of the earth. And Rashi brings the proof from Esther HaMalka. Esther HaMalka was with Achashverosh. She didn't give up her life. She was a married woman with Mordechai. What's the pshat? Because she's not doing anything. She's passive. A man, on the other hand, is doing an active role, and therefore he has the halacha of Yaharig Val Yavar, which Taisus has a few different opinions. Is it because, like Rashi says, or because karka oilam? Is it because she's not getting any pleasure? Is it because There's a few different interpretations that Taisus has, but that's the arichas that Taisus has. And then Taisus gets a whole discussion regarding if a man's doing it also in a passive way, what would the halacha be in that way? But as Rashi just points out, that this halacha would be specifically on a man and not on a woman. But that's the source for the halacha of Gilai Rais. As we continue with Beis, so wait a second, you're telling me that the whole halacha of Gilai Rais is actually learned out from that of Ritzeach. And that's what the pasuk is comparing the two halachas. But as we continue with Amid Beis, it says the Gemara of Ritzeach, Gufim and Olam. How actually do you know, which you're learning out from, regarding murder, that the halacha is Yahar Vayava, that you have to allow yourself to be killed and not commit murder yourself. Says the Gemara Svari, it's logic. What's the logic? Because the Gemara brings a story to illustrate this halacha. Now, who the asla kamei de Rabba? There was a certain person came by the Rabba, and Amalei said to him like this: I have a problem. He says, Armali Mari Durai, the governor of the town where I live, told me like this. He says, Katlu Laplanya, I want you, maybe he's an ex-hitman, all these, films, this guy, he repented from his old ways and he's a good citizen, and say, look, you know you're a good hitman, you're an assassin, you did this for many years, I want you to kill that person. If not, Katil Malach, we're going to execute you. So then he comes to Rabbi and says, what should I do? He says, if I don't do this, they're going to kill me. So Malay said to him, Niktalach v'loy tiktal, let them kill you and you don't kill that other person. Why? The famous words of my chazis. Where did you see fit? The dama didach sumiktay, that your blood is redder than the other person. In other words, Rashi explains the lumdus behind the discussion over here. What was the meta message? It says, why do you think it's going to be permitted? Why are you asking me the shah? Why are you coming to the Rav? You're saying, because we know it says in the pasuk, it says that you're supposed to live by the mitzvahs in the Torah, and you're not supposed to die by them. So we know all the mitzvahs in Torah, you violate them to stay alive. Now, what's the reason why? So it's very interesting. Rashi tells us what's the reason for this is because, as we said before, a Jewish soul is so precious in front of Hashem more than all his mitzvahs. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, nullify the mitzvah to stay alive, because your soul is more important to me than all my mitzvahs. But now, where anyway a Jewish soul is going to be lost, and the mitzvah anyway is not going to be kept, so why would it be better in front of Hashem that you violate his mitzvah of Ritzeach, of killing, to save your life, but why is your life better than his? At least don't commit murder, then no avay will be done, and the Jewish life will anyways be lost. What makes you think? And there is also they have the discussion also regarding, well, how about if, let's say, passively, do you have to give up your life in a passive way also about not committing murder? Let's say they say we're going to throw you onto the child and it's going to kill the child. Would you also have that gets into that whole discussion regarding karka olam, regarding a passive way? But just in a simple understanding is that there's an avera over here. The avera is called murder. Usually we tell you to violate an avera to save your life. But here, anyways, a Jewish life is going to be lost. So why do the option of violating Avera to save your life and kill his life? But what's the point? The whole reason why I should let you be over the Avera is to save a Jewish life. But now, why is your life better than his life? So don't do the Avera. And then yes, your life will be lost and his life will be saved. And therefore, as the Gemara says, maybe the life of that person is more red. Which again is also the same concept, just it's so important to stress. That even if they came to the greatest Gadol Adar, and they said, you see that Shmendrik, you see that guy, that Oizvav, the Menuvel, that this guy, kill him, or else we're going to kill you. You know what we say? No, you get killed and he's going to survive. What? It's the Gadol Adar. Yeah, well, all the Torah is going to be lost, all the Chesed, the whole world's going to mourn, he's going to have a Levaya of 14 million people, and if this guy died, he wouldn't have a minion. They say, no. Who said that your blood is redder than his blood? This is one of those Gemaras that you go crazy over, right? Because we think we walk around. Me, I'm the guy that no one even cares. No one look at me. If I disappeared, they wouldn't even know. Where was it? Oh, they just kept. Oh, bring out the schnitzel. No one even cares. And the Gemara is saying you don't get it. They would tell him to get killed, and not you, because who said you don't know whose blood is red? Now the Gemara just continues with a story. Regarding the halacha of the Mishnah, we said about the pregnant woman that she's allowed to eat because of the danger to her and to the child. So the Gemara brings two stories regarding expectant mothers who had these cravings for food in Yom Kippur. There was this pregnant woman who had smelled food in Yom Kippur. And again, she had this craving for food. So Asa came into the Rebbe, they came from the Rebbe. So Amalahu, he said to them, Zilu l'chu shala, go whisper to the pregnant woman, the Yoma Kippur, you know, maybe she can hold out. You know, you get like one of those rabbanim, you know, yes, kid, whisper to her. You know, just a pashta zach. So the chushala, so they whispered, well, chisha, and she accepted that whisper. In other words, that stopped the fetus from the craving. I mean, the mother doesn't have so much control. She's got these pickles and ice cream 3 o'clock in the morning. Waiting is coming. It's not crazy, not delirious. The child, the fetus, the way the Gemara is, has the craving, and if she can't, she needs it. But the whisper was told to the and the fetus heard it, and the fetus stopped. Incredible how, you know, developmentally speaking, people think I'm crazy when I tell people about developmental stages, and you learn certain Gemaras, and the Gemara is saying fetuses already have cravings when they're in the womb. I mean, you have to understand how important this is, and you know, to understand that the life of the child. You know, when I say when you were 1 or 2 or 3, what happened to the child, they're like, okay, sure, forget it. Don't be mishig. You know what I'm saying? Okay, don't blame everything. Hey, look at the Gemaras. They're talking about fetuses, how integral is their cravings even as a fetus, but the child accepts. And Kari Allah, so Rabbi said regarding this fetus, Pasuk in Yomah. Pasuk says, before I formed you in the womb, Yidaticha, I knew you, etc., which it says that before you came out of the womb, I was sanctified. I sanctified you. As a prophet to the nations, I placed you. Meaning, you see already the quality of the person and the interactions with the world, even as a fetus. Because you see, the child heard the whisper from the Rav and stopped the craving. Didn't make the mother eat Yom Kippur. Nothing minei Rabbi Yechon. Who came out as a child was the great Rabbi Yechon. But then there's another story. Hahi ubra the orcha. There was another pregnant woman that had a smell on Yom Kippur. Also came from Rabbi Chanina. Who said to them, whisper to the mother. The loyal chisha, and the whisper didn't work. The cravings did not subside. The woman said, nah, I'm sorry, I need to eat. Karaleh, they recite on her pasuk in Tehillim as we continue to have a Pegimel and Aleph, Zuru Rishoyim. So Zuru can mean dispersed, but also it means that they became Zara. The wicked ones became foreign to their Father in heaven, Mirachim already from the womb. And as the pasuk there continues, that even from the womb already, they already were straying with false words. And Nafik Minei Shabsai, what came out of this womb was Shabsai Otza Peri, which the Gemara brings in Baba Basra, that Tzadim Abayz. The halach is that you're not allowed to store, you're not allowed to hoard the produce of Eretz Yisrael or anything that's what's called essential foods, because that causes the market price to go up. And he hoarded, and he made the market price to go up, which he was recorded for infamy for his acts. And he was the product of that child, meaning from that fetus who couldn't be stopped with his cravings. And so you see, again, a person, a woman has to eat Yom Kippur, don't stop because of this story. But the point is that you see that even from, as a fetus, that is something that starts already, and therefore it says the Mishnah that if a woman needs to eat, you have to, because it's going to be dangerous for the woman and for the mother. Thanks, and for the child. Thank you.